Hello and welcome, friends. It is your friendly duo, the magical life maven, magical maven midwife. What? I don't know. It's menopause, people. I am your magical medium who helps people with their spiritual life and navigating death, as well as my more coherent friend, Laura. Please introduce yourself so I don't botch it.
Yes, I am your dazzling deaf doula, as always, Laura Shaw. And this is my beautiful friend and co-host, Angie, who has had a rough few days. The new moon coming in is really coming in.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And there's been a little bit of grief, which we will talk about today. But you've stumbled upon us. We are your hosts for the Oh for Dying Out Loud podcast. And today we are going to be talking about legacy projects. And why we thought we would talk about this is just to give context. So a friend of mine just recently had sent me a link to this book. It's called Griffin's Heart, and you can find it on Amazon. Oh, I've got so much stuff in here now. So Griffin's Heart is this book written by Regan Pasternak, and it is a book slash journal slash keepsake slash memoir for those who are mourning the loss of a pet. And I have to say, it is fantastic. And I'm so glad that she recommended this book, because I think you and I had talked about this in the past, about how sometimes as we're navigating grief, we get to a place where it becomes a little softer, a little less impactful, and we go about our days and we think, oh, things are rolling and I'm doing great. And then that tidal wave of grief smacks you down.
Yeah.
And I just feel it's super important. I didn't realize how important it was to not get this mindset of, oh no, the grief has hit me again, I've got to keep outrunning it. It is more so, at least for me, the process is keep feeling it, because the more you can feel it and let it move through you, the more healing that happens.
Agreed.
And this has been a tool for that. And it's been interesting because I work through a little bit at a time. There are, stories about her loss of her pet and how she came to write this book and create this, because there wasn't a vehicle for people who are mourning the loss of a pet to really process that, because we still, I think our society culturally tends to lean more towards, well, they're just pets, right? And so we just don't do as much. But there's places for journal prompts and pictures. Look at those guys, they're ridiculous, they're so cute. That's Cinnamon and Toby. So I've been reading the essays and doing the journal prompts, and I have to say that I only can go through a little bit at a time, because it does bring up an awful lot of grief. And what pictures do I want to put? And just, she asks you memories, like, what was your morning routine like? What was your evening routine? And so it's kicking up a lot of stuff. And, that of course affects my memory, along with menopause. Super great cocktail. But I just wanted to bring that forward, one, to share that with people about pets, but also as an entry point to this discussion of legacy projects and what that entails and what is the importance of that. So
So I think my first foray into the world of a memory project or a legacy project, my grandmother had dementia. I've talked about her before. A beautiful woman, led a exotic life, let's call it, of crazy.
great word, exotic. I like
Right,
that.
right. And she lived with my parents towards the end. In her final days, we had moved her to an assisted living location, but she had lived with my parents once she started getting kind of more forgetful and no longer able to do all the things. And my parents both worked. So at the time I was not working. So I would stay home with her. She was in a position to pay me some money to help take care of her. And I would go over to their house. We would have breakfast and lunch, and we would go on errands and do things. We would watch a lot of Matlock every day after lunch before she would go lay down for her nap. Anyway, so I actually tracked kind of the things that we did. My mother did some of it, and then I did some of it, and we would talk about the things that she did in her day. So that I just recently came across them, and it says, you know, things like the girls came to visit you today and you went and got ice cream, or you went to visit Debbie, who was her favorite waitress, owner of a restaurant. And so it was this really beautiful kind of memorial to just help her remember and to help us remember the days. So fast forward, she has passed away, and it's a nice memory. So as I kind of got into doula work, one of the beautiful things, so there's a lot of places that you can go to online and things that you can do to, you don't have to be super talented or journal things yourself. You can do your own legacy project if you choose to. But one of the beautiful things about a doula, and one of the roles they often play, is to help bridge that gap and work on a legacy project. So sometimes that can be going through photos with the person or the family member who is dying or in the later stages, and helping them relive memories, writing down stories that go with pictures that you can share, or helping the family kind of process those things. There's it's called Storyworth, I think, or Storyworthy, which I have since gotten my parents each a subscription to. It sends them a weekly prompt via email, and they just answer questions. And they had a year of questions. And then in a year after they're done with their final question, a book will be written by this company and shipped to them. And you can either create the questions tailored around them. You can select through the questions written by this company, or you can just let them randomly pick questions. So you can kind of tailor it.
That's super cool. I love that. Because I was sitting there thinking, and you and I kind of talked offline about this, like, you know, writing your own memoir, just, you know, doing your doing your own legacy project and everything. And I have to say, I'm a horrible about decluttering, meaning that I tend to throw stuff away. It's like, oh, look at this old, you know, high school yearbook, or these, you know, photo albums, get them out of here. And so now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd kept some of this so that I could write my own story, but I wouldn't know where to start.
Right.
You know, like that seems daunting. But if I had a weekly prompt, what a great journaling exercise, number one. And number two, if they put together a little book for you, that's a great memory.
Right. It's beautiful. You can get as many copies that you get, one free copy, but you can also purchase copies. I don't think it was terribly expensive. We bought it for Christmas for my parents. So I don't think it was a lot. We got them each their own, clearly, because they had their own life stories to share. Yeah. So, but another beautiful thing you can do is a question and answer video diary, because how impressive is it for a great grandchild or a grandchild who will never have the opportunity to meet? You know, my dad is full of wisdom. My mom is full of wisdom. So I have a video of my mom teaching me how to sew masks as we've lived through a plague in this time. Right. So I videotaped her. She's like, now do this. And she's just so careful and funny. And my dad and I made a bed together, and I videotaped some of the teachings that he gave when he was working with my grandchildren, which are his great grandchildren. So these great little video pieces of him, like, nope, hold the drill like this. And so sometimes just having things where they can share a story at a time I mean, everyone's got a cell phone, their video, it's not challenging. You can save it in the cloud, put it on a CD if kids still do that today or whatever.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so those are really easy legacy projects, and that's part of what a doula does, if that is something that the family would like them to do,
Sure.
is just allow them to tell their stories. As I worked with elderly clients, and I'm sure this is true for young clients who are in the process of dying as well, but they just have stories to share. I worked at a
We all
nursing home,
do.
right? And a lady had made her own wedding gown, like the whole thing made this lace and this beautiful, like it was just unbelievable. And I remember thinking, what a great story. She had these pictures, and how amazing would that be to have this photo of this dress and the story of what it took for her to create this dress. And yeah, just things like that. I think it can be as complicated or as simple as a person wants it to be. And literally a recording, I would love to have a video of my grandmother. And I probably have her somewhere on a Christmas video or something. I definitely have pictures of her.
Yeah.
But she yodeled on the radio when she was young, and she sang on the radio. She could play. Yeah, yes, believe it or not, because I am not a talented singer. But my grandmother absolutely was. And what I wouldn't give for something, a piece of that or a story from that to still exist.
Right.
Other than me just knowing that she had done this.
Right.
So yeah,
Well,
I
it's
think,
an expansion of like,
Yeah.
'cause when you talk about that, it's an expansion of the celebration of life video. Like I just got the one for my grandfather, and it's kind of like, okay, let's everybody, send in your pictures and stuff. And then, select a piece of music. And so it's just a slideshow essentially. And there were no videos. And my grandfather was a drummer in a big band. And we used to go and see him at the VFW. And we thought he was a rock star,
right, of course.
but no recordings, no video
Right.
recordings whatsoever that I know of anyway. And so you're right. I mean, it's like those are some special memories, but thank God I have at least the celebration of life videos.
Right,
But
right.
so, there's that simple one as an example. There's so many different options to it, but then you can continue to, expand upon that. And it's almost like a life review for you,
Yes.
but it's also for those you leave behind, your loved ones, to have some fond memories of the uniqueness of life that you had.
Right. And I think it's super important because I say this a lot to my kids, the parents that, or the grandparents or the parents that my children see me with now are not the parents that raised me. And the moment that I was able to realize that my parents were humans first, and they were young, and they were, my mom danced on the stage with Booker T and the MGs to Green Onions, the song Green Onions. And I can absolutely picture it. She loved mini skirts. She got married in a mini dress that is so tiny, first of all, but so short. I probably wouldn't let my kids wear it to school. Like, holy shit, mom.
This is so funny. Like, this explains so much about you and your kids,
Right.
who I know and love, but that's just hysterical.
Right. And so these are the things that I think they're not necessarily things that people would know about my mother if they didn't, why it's not like she goes around reciting this piece of information. My dad used to do sound for a band as a side gig, as a side hustle. Yeah. And I still have those recordings. They're ridiculous and lovely. And I know all the songs. Of course I do.
Of course.
But yeah, so there are these stories that maybe the grandchildren that see them as 75-year-olds, or they're not 75 yet, sorry mom and dad,
Right.
But as 70-year-olds, maybe they don't understand that Pink Grandma, as they affectionately call her, she can outdance anybody, or that CT Grandpa used to swill beer with the best of them, like, and honky tonk. He went through a honky tonk face.
Honky tonk.
And the big cowboy
That's
hats and the beard. Yeah,
outstanding.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's so fun to have pieces of that and see families maybe view their loved one in a different way. I've said this maybe here before, maybe in one of our events, but my friend, she was at a funeral for one of her aunts, and she has a huge family. And in that funeral, she said she sounded like she was so fun because she had no idea.
Right. Right.
Because she knew her in this window,
Right.
and she
Right.
didn't know the whole person that she
Right.
was.
Yeah. And
So,
everybody's got a different lens, right?
mhm, mhm.
And so I think that's what's really cool is it that you begin to see how multifaceted these people were, you
Right.
know. But talk to us a little bit more about, well, first of all, before we go to my question,
Mhm.
so what's the name of that website or that subscription you talked
I'm
about?
pretty sure it's Storyworthy, but let me just make sure that that's true. I get emails from them sometimes, so
Okay,
they like to
cool.
share with me that
Yeah,
because I
because I
purchased.
think that would be a really cool project. I'm very interested in that, but I think that would be, you know, very cool.
Yes, it's Storyworth.com.
Storyworth.
And there
Okay,
are other versions of the same thing.
sure.
The other thing a little shout out, well, you can ask your question first. I'll write this down for later.
Well, and that, yeah, we'll put any associated links in the description of this
Okay.
podcast so people can find their stuff. They can find Griffin's Heart, whatever. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about why. I mean, obviously, to remember your loved ones, it's great. I can see the benefit for someone who is suffering from dementia. It might be something it's a journal to help them to remember, to read about their life. But what are some of the other benefits? Like why? Because I can tell you, I'm pretty sure that outside of the photo albums that we have, there's no stories or legacy project that my parents have started working on. And I'm not sure, I don't know if they'd be open to that, like what's the point? What's the real point?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So first and foremost, every human being
Mhm.
has lived experiences. And in other countries, you can check out a person where you can go to a human library essentially and go have this interactive conversation with another human
Oh,
being.
right. Yeah.
And they can tell you about their lives because we understand each other better. So which is huge. Like
Yeah.
I have seen Holocaust survivors speak, and I know that there are humans in the world who deny the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And I am telling you that I cannot imagine that you could look one of those humans in the eyes. It went in the room with you,
Right.
who tells you the story of their lived experience
Right.
and not be touched and not
Right.
understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's that piece, this kind of human connection. And another piece, it's kind of like a time capsule that got buried somewhere that you can pull out for your children or your children's children 100 years from now, and they can see this crazy thing of what, first of all, we are living in crazy times. We're living through a plague, we're living like we've had some things, people.
But this is nothing compared. I mean, I was reading an article, side note, about, things that have happened, like, during the Second World War,
Right.
and, so there's a lot that's happened in our entire life, in a
Yes,
human's
yeah.
lifespan. So there's a lot.
Right. And so then there's also the idea that maybe you will never understand how somebody lived. Like maybe you see your parents this way, but maybe you didn't know that they grew up with nothing, or they came from foster care, or like, I don't know, there's a benefit there. But another piece that I really got intrigued with is this idea that especially for people who die maybe young,
Mhm.
maybe they have children and their children will not know them or they won't know their voice. Like the thing I miss the most about people who I have lost
Mhm.
is their voices. And when it starts to fade in my head, if I
Right.
can't quite hear I can't quite grab it anymore. And I think for me, being able to hear someone tell their story in their own words, even if it's just their story, and
Right.
somebody else who lived through the same event maybe would have a different take. I
Mhm.
think that there's something powerful about that.
Mhm.
And I also think that it can help us, I think it can help us with our grief. Um, the number of people, I have a former coworker, bless her sweetheart and friend, and she lost both of her parents within, I think it was like 30 days this past year, like
Oh my
absolutely
God.
unexpectedly. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And in a blink,
Mhm.
she became orphaned, really. And I mean, she still has family and she has siblings,
Right,
she
right.
has
But
children, but she lost her parents rapid fire.
yes,
Devastating, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
having those snippets
Mhm.
or words of wisdom or a story of a shared experience or a story of, whatever,
Mhm.
um, is kind of a lovely thing, I think,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
other humans and our family and our friends, because it's
Mhm.
our family of origin, but also our chosen family, to
Right,
be able to hang on to that.
right,
Not in a unhealthy way, I would hope,
right,
but
right.
definitely, rather than hanging on to a photo album that I'll never look through,
Mhm.
having a handful of stories or um, a gift of something to
Right,
hang on to. I think it's just a
right.
lovely idea.
Yeah, well, and I think, I mean, it certainly helps those who are left behind,
Mhm.
because one of the things that I'm noticing out of doing this Griffin's Heart is that, they're asking prompts, about remembering, for example, what was their physical appearance like? Were they soft? Were they scruffy? What did they look like? What was their personality like? What was your morning routine like? What was your, evening routine like? And I have to say that while there's been a fair amount of tears going
Of
through
course.
and reliving some of this stuff, but
Mhm.
there's some laugh out loud moments too. Like, what were some of the weird idiosyncrasies that they had? Like both of my boys, they're so adorable.
So
Um,
adorable.
they were horrible about stealing food.
Oh,
Horrible, horrible. Things like I could take out loaves of banana bread, leave them on the counter with a towel over them, walk away for 5 minutes, and I'd come back and there's a paw print minted into the banana bread with a chunk out of the corner. Or, the time that we were having dinner, we were having a pasta dinner, and the colander of pasta was in the sink. And I look over, and here is Cinnamon, his butt sticking up out of the colander because he was grabbing a mouthful of spaghetti noodles.
mhm,
And
mhm.
when I yelled at him, he took off running with spaghetti noodles flopping outside of his mouth as he's tearing off down to the basement.
That's beautiful.
So I mean, there's stuff like that, and I think the laughter is also the healing. And
Mhm.
from a mediumship perspective, that's one of the big things that pets in particular want you to know, your loved ones want you to know, is that in your grief, yes, they know it's going to be painful, but don't just remember the sad stuff.
Right.
Don't, like that's one of the things we often will remember right
Mhm.
first that brings up a lot of tears is
Right.
when our pets have left or when our loved ones have left.
Mhm.
And they really want you to remember the good stuff, the laughter stuff. Why? Because it's healing. It solidifies those happy memories so you remember their life and not just their death.
Right.
And it puts you in an elevated vibration, not to spiritually bypass, but I'm just saying that it's the whole experience. And so I think that in and of itself transforms the way that we look at death, right? Because now we're not just looking at death as this awful thing where their body, starts to fail and then they leave and we're sad.
Right.
It becomes, oh, look at this beautiful life and all the things that they did over the course of their lives. Some of the pictures that showed up in my grandparents' celebration of life videos, I had never seen before. And it was so wonderful. It's like, oh, look at who they were.
Right.
The pictures, I mean, my mom's still around, but I recently found some pictures of her as a kindergartner. She was freaking adorable. Adorable, and so it changes the way that we look at people, and we don't see them just as that one snapshot. We see them as this whole multi-dimensional being that has beauty and challenges, and there's been good times and bad times, and I just think it makes the whole experience richer. And again, the whole point is to begin to get more comfortable with death and dying and that process.
Right. I think too that it informs us to live. So
bingo.
Right.
Bingo.
So seeing the I can't wait to read the stories of my parents, if they'll let me, or maybe they're X-rated. I don't know. I haven't seen them yet. They've answered all the questions.
That's funny.
Right. Who knows? They're saucy, those two. So
yes.
I am really I am a big proponent of looking back at someone's existence and seeing all the incredible things they packed into whatever amount of time they had. And the saddest thing to me would be if my life had ended before I had had these incredible experiences, no matter how short life. Right. So that can be, watching little kids. I was at the mall in Des Moines this weekend, and it was early in the morning before the mall even opened, but it was open for mall walkers.
Yeah.
And this very genius mom, I don't know who she is, but she's genius because she brought her 2 small children to the play area that they have in malls now, and just let them be maniacs. Just, I mean, for like an hour and a half, as we were getting ready to do the things we were doing there, she absolutely had those children just running all their energy, and they were on rocket ships, and they were on I cannot remember.
They were kids.
Right. And it was glorious. It was this just beautiful kind of experience. And so whatever that amount of life that you have in you, just to have these brilliant and notice these lovely kind of pieces. So it's really about cramming as much life and experiences, I think. And so I think a good legacy project helps with healing. It helps society and the world understand that this person existed. I think it helps the person who creates them.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah,
so
okay, good.
Let's talk about how it certainly helps the people who are being left behind. We know that. We've talked about that. But how would it possibly help me, to start thinking about doing that now? Right.
So I did this crazy thing for Christmas for 3 of my beautiful children. I'm going to just hold one of them up. That's my grandma, and that is one of my children right there. And that's my niece, who is 10 days younger than my child. And I created these books for each of my children. And in it took hours and hours. I put pictures of family. I like to call them grimoires. I put pieces of history and pieces of memories, and each of my kids kind of has a different thing. One is a little more of a cook, and one is a gardener. And so for me, the beauty of that was that I got to every one of those kids got something different.
Right.
It took a lot of time and thought, but what I got to do by me doing that is I got to think about my relationship with each of my children. And I got to think about who they are as humans outside of anything. Like, I am not a gardener. I kill most green plants,
That's
sadly.
not true.
The garden's
She
doing okay.
just gave me a giant state fair worthy zucchini, so.
That came from the CSA box, friend, not my garden.
Oh,
Yeah, I got tomatoes and
I was
some
trying to
jalapenos.
get, I was trying to
Right.
get.
Thank you
credit.
though.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm each of my kids kind of has their own individual pieces. And so I got to weave, and I'm going to continue to add things. I've started this recipe collection of these sacred family recipes that we had
Yes.
that I was growing up. Like my grandmother always made this, and my mother always made this, and this is how we used it, and this is how she cooked it, and this is why you loved it or hated it, whatever.
Right.
And then I would leave this
Grandma's Jello salad.
right. Everybody hated it. My aunt would always make these, they're like corned beef, cream cheese, pickles, and you roll them up.
What? Oh, stop. What?
Right, it's like a piece of corned beef or dried, I don't know, some kind of meats, and then you put cream cheese on it and you roll a pickle in it, and then you slice it and they're little bites.
Oh
And
my God.
she made that for all our Thanksgivings and Christmases. My Aunt Marcine, bless her, she is since gone.
Yeah.
And nobody really would eat them. I liked them when I was a kid. And she would make them, and then she would always have enough left to take to her next event, which she would go to her husband's family next. And
Right.
so one year, my dad and my uncle ate every stinking one just to be shit, like absolute shit.
And did they pay for it?
Right, yes. Just to do that. And they were so mean to, like, and they still laugh about, like, my dad still chuckle, like, that is just this ridiculous family story. Marcine's been gone since I don't know that my youngest remembers her, but I hope she remembers that story, because I definitely have told it, and I will share that delightful recipe. Yeah, so it's kind of just this. So for the person who's dying or the person who's writing, sometimes it's an opportunity to make peace with some of the things that you've experienced in life, but also to share your truth with somebody. And it's not, you don't have to write it like an apology letter. You don't have, like, just literally, some of the some of the best legacy projects that I've actually seen there might be pieces of, like, when I grew up, or where did you first meet mom? How did you, what was your what it was, how did you ask her to marry you? And in my family, it was through the wall of an outhouse. So a true romantic, my dad. It's super great story. So good times. Right. This describes so much about why I am the way I am, I'm sure.
It does. It does.
Right.
Keep filling in the gaps,
right,
man.
just all of them. But some of them are just really great, because I've seen people who are like, hey, mom, could you tell the girls how you learn to drive a car, or could you show them how you sew this thing? Or sometimes it's as much as asking someone for advice. How did you become financially stable? Or, what's your best advice for a kid, or whatever? And so sometimes it can be a great question and answer, where it is literally, what would you want somebody to remember you for? Like, what's your secret bread recipe or cookie recipe that you didn't want to share with anybody?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that you just touched on something that made me think about this, that I think it's really about creating meaning and understanding that your life has meaning,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Like to be able to write down your experiences rather than I think this is what really transforms our life and that transition into death is that I think we get to a point where it's like, oh, I'm going to get to my death, I'm going to pass on and none of it matters, right? Because I'm not going to be here anymore.
Mhm.
But if we were to approach it, like I'm thinking for myself now, I've not even thought about this. Like, I don't have children. And, I sit there and go, well, what's the point of me writing my story? The point is that because your life matters.
It does.
And it's a great way for, like, I'm thinking it's a great way for me personally, and I'm just riffing here, but I'm just thinking it's a great way to kind of do a life review.
Yeah.
They often say there's that story about how, that, oh, I had a near-death experiences and I saw my life flash before my eyes or
Mhm.
what have you, or there's, a lot of people believe, or, if they have had a near-death experience or a
Mhm.
death experience and come back, that there is this life review because, okay, and I'm going to step out aside the box here and go woo woo, but
Okay. Ooh, I love it.
when we pass on,
Mhm.
that is what we do because we are souls who have chosen to be in this incarnation.
Mhm.
And we did so with the understanding that we were going to have unique experiences. And it was for our express purpose of being fully human, to experience everything that we wanted to experience, to learn the lessons that we wanted to learn.
Right.
And so if we're doing that on the other side of the veil, we could do that now where we could take a step back. I mean, we talk about learning from our life experiences right now anyway. And what a great way to do that review. And I'm thinking things like, being able to take stock of all the things I've accomplished. I can't tell you, and I'm sure you know this as my BFF, that there have been plenty of times where I'm like, I haven't offered much to this society. And
Mhm.
you're like, let's review,
Right.
like, and so I think it really helps us to take stock of no matter who we are, what we've done in our lives,
Mhm.
that our life has meaning, that our experiences have meaning. And so it's good for us to be able to know that. And the more that we know that about ourselves, right? That my life has meaning, my experiences have meaning, it has shaped the way that I have learned things and process things. But then when I go out and I read somebody else's story or I hear their story, I now have a greater appreciation because of the fact that I now know, oh, this is their lived experience, like you
Right.
talked about before. And this is how their ideas were shaped and how they navigated through some of those difficult things. We're always inspired by the keynote speaker at some conference who talks about their lived experience of overcoming triumph or overcoming challenge to triumph.
Right.
And we each have a little bit of that, no matter how small the triumph may seem to you or how big the challenge may have seemed to you. There's value in our stories and they want to be heard, even if the only people who hear it is, the piece of paper. And, but I just think that I'd never considered doing this, never. And, you think, well, I'll just wait until I get on in my years. Why not start now?
Right. Why not?
That's I mean, that's what, let's be honest. I mean, this is what Facebook and Pinterest and a lot of these, things are. We put so much stuff out there now, but there's a record. I have a friend. I love her. She's got how many kids? I think it's four. I think it's four. Um, God help me if she's got more than that. But her Facebook posts I live for because she documents her children growing up. I have watched her kids grow up on Facebook and all of these funny videos and little rants that she makes, and the funny jokes about her kids and the goofy things that they do. And then the memories that post up, right? Like Facebook goes, oh, 20 years ago today, or 10 years ago today, here's what. And so there's digital ways that we're doing that already.
Right.
And what a lovely thing, she'll post, a memory from 10 years ago, and like, oh my God, I just love this chubby baby's fat legs, and
Right.
they're gurgling, smile and laugh. And oh my gosh, my daughter, she's still a drama queen, and it's just fun to relive those things and remember that these are people.
Right.
And they have meaning, and they've had a rich human experience. I just think it makes life richer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And being able to hang on to that, so that no matter the miles, the distance, alive, deceased, we still get to carry those memories, and we still mattered in whatever way we matter. For sure.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I think, for example, some of the stories and things that I have learned about my own parents or family members now that I never used to know, dramatically has, in some instances, changed my perception, right?
Right.
So, and I think this is also very useful. So, and I'm not saying that this is going to automatically launch someone into forgiveness or being empathetic. You come to those when you're ready for that level of healing. But for me personally, that has happened where, different people in my life who I've lost, I have my lived experience of them. And then there's other people's lived experiences of them, and, how that all plays out. And so it creates a more complex picture, and you go, oh yeah, okay. So this person, I can choose to remember all the happy things, and I do, but I also get to learn that they were human, and they screwed up. And this is why they were the way they were, because of their history. For example, my grandfather, he was one of 5 children, and I'm probably not going to get the story completely right, but something happened where his father was absent. And so mom says, I can't afford to take care of 5 kids. You're 13, so you're going to go up the road a little ways, and you're going to live at Farmer Joe's place and work on his farm a little bit, and he's going to give you room and board, and he taught himself how to play the drums from listening to recordings because he couldn't afford lessons, I mean, there's all these different things that it's like, oh, wow, this is where he gets his survivalist, resiliency from, why he had 3 or 4 different jobs all the time, because he was just doing everything he could to take care of his family. So those are the kinds of stories that help you to really get to know how people are the way they are and what their lived experience was. Because otherwise, for me, if I didn't know any of that stuff, it would have just been Grandpa. He was Santa Claus.
Right. He was amazing.
He was amazing. He was the best grandpa ever. He bought us gifts, and he took us out on the boat, on 4th of July weekends and stuff, and that is true. But there's a whole nother level to his experience, and there's that history. And I mean, we watch the History Channel or PBS, and we find out, that, oh yeah, there's this name of this person that is, in my ancestry. But when you start to hear about the stories, oh my gosh, it's really, that's what gets you in the heart space. Right.
And it's what a beautiful connection to have for someone.
Yeah. And and again, I think it goes back to, it can help us live. It can help us find and extrapolate more meaning from our lives and have meaningful connections. It can help us through grief.
Yes.
I can't tell you how helpful this book has been, and it will be a memoir, like things that I had kind of tucked away that I'd forgotten about, like all the different nicknames I had for my cats, and
Sure.
how they came to be in my life. How did they come to be? One was a stray and one was a Humane Society, kitty. What were some of the funny, I mean, there's just some really, but there's also parts in here too, where at the very beginning of the book, it really goes into and asks you questions about what has your grief process looked like, and have you had support, and what do you wish people would have said to you? And so it really is a
Lovely.
whole experience. And so I know we're wrapping up our podcast episode for today, but I never would have considered like legacy project. When you mentioned that, I'm like, that sounds like a boring topic. But I'm just being real. It just
Yeah.
sounded like a little bit of a boring topic. Like, yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's something that we can all start to do now, is start journaling, start, taking stock of not just posting selfies on Facebook, for crying out loud, but, really putting together this wonderful life trajectory and the meaning of it,
Absolutely.
and do that for your family. Like, I'm seriously going to ask my parents, like, I'd love to sit down and just start asking them questions and start, keeping track of some stuff. That would be
Mhm.
great. So, yeah. So, anything else that you want to say about legacy projects?
Well, I'm a big proponent, so I think it's important. And I think that when you get the opportunity to experience someone else's legacy project, take some time to consider it, or read it, or view it, because you're right. At the end of life, it should be more than just, although a screen full of beautiful pictures is set to music is amazing. There's just so much more for you, for them, but also, as I always say, the best thing that I get out of working in this space is that it helps inform the way that I live. So
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's what we're all about. It's not just death and dying, people. That is part of our life journey, and it is the beautiful part that we can learn to accept. But this is going to help us to live a more rich lifestyle. So,
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much,
Mhm.
everyone who's watching, everyone who supports this podcast. Share it with your peeps. Let us know other topics that you want us to talk about. And we look forward to being with you on our next episode. So thank you for joining us. This is O for Dying Out Loud. I am your magical life midwife, Angie Cat. And joining me was,
I am Laura. I am your delightful death doula.
yay. We'll see you all next time on O for Dying Out Loud.